All right, welcome everyone to this deep dive, and it's all about Gaudiya Vaishnavism.
It really is.
Yeah, and we've got a pretty interesting mix of sources to work with this time.
We do. We have some scholarly excerpts, some firsthand accounts, even some investigative journalism.
Yeah, and it's all focusing on this tradition, this religious tradition, and honestly, some of the controversies that have popped up around it.
Absolutely. And that's really what we're going to do today. We're going to explore that core philosophy,
Yeah.
trace it back through the centuries, and really confront those controversies.
Okay, so let's get into this. Let's unpack it all. Where do we even start?
Well, let's start with the foundations.
Okay.
With Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It has its origins way back in the 16th century
Okay.
in Bengal. And really, there's one key figure we need to talk about, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
All right, so we're talking 16th century Bengal Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What's the scene?
Think devotional chanting, ecstatic dancing, a very personal connection to the divine.
Okay, so this is part of the Bhakti movement.
Absolutely. It's all about that direct personal experience with Krishna, that really intensely personal relationship.
And that sets it apart from how?
Well, think of other approaches to Hinduism that were more focused on intellectual study or just ritual. This was different. This was really about that personal connection.
I can see how that might have ruffled some feathers back then. I mean,
Yeah.
especially reading Keeping Faith with Katuri. It sounds like these early Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they got some pushback, didn't they?
Oh, they did. They definitely faced resistance. It wasn't smooth sailing.
So what was the problem? Were other schools of thought just not into the whole ecstatic dancing thing?
Well, it was more than that. Back then, those intellectual circles, they really valued philosophical debate,
Right.
rigorous arguments.
Yeah.
And while these early Gaudiya Vaishnavas were deeply devout, they didn't necessarily have that complex theological framework to counter those arguments.
Interesting. So it wasn't that their beliefs were wrong. It was more like they didn't fit the mold of what was considered acceptable in those circles.
Exactly. Their strength was in how they lived their faith.
Wow.
That energy was contagious.
Okay, I see. So if their philosophical arguments weren't as developed, how did they overcome that resistance? Was it just Chaitanya's charisma? Was he just that good of a leader?
Charisma definitely played a part. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Right.
But one crucial turning point was the Katuri Council.
Okay. What was that?
Well, it was this gathering. Different Vaishnava leaders all coming together to find some common ground.
Ah, so a kind of peace summit.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
And they actually reached an agreement. They agreed on the significance of the Panchatattva mantra.
Okay, and the Panchatattva mantra is?
It's this powerful invocation that sort of established a hierarchy within the tradition.
So instead of constantly competing for followers, they unified under this shared belief system.
Exactly. It was a strategic move.
Very smart. And, speaking of structure, Keeping Faith with Katuri also talks about how important initiation and community are in this tradition. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. Initiation into the Gaudiya Vaishnava community.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. When you're initiated, you receive your spiritual name from your guru, your teacher.
Oh, wow.
It symbolizes a massive shift in your identity. The idea is you're receiving knowledge directly from a realized master. It's a very personal, very intimate lineage.
I can see why scholars would call this the routinization of charisma. It's like taking these intense, intangible experiences
Yes.
and creating a structure, a way to pass them down.
Precisely. And, with structure
Yeah.
often comes conflict,
Oh, this sounds familiar.
which leads us to the fracturing of the Gaudiya math in the 20th century.
And we have the Sons of the Sun to thank for really laying out what happened after Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati passed away. Remind me who he was again?
Right. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he was this major figure,
Yeah.
really helped spread Gaudiya Vaishnavism in the early 1900s.
Yeah,
Known for his scholarship, his efforts to bring the teachings beyond India,
right.
and he established the Gaudiya math, a whole network of temples and centers.
Okay. And that really helped expand the tradition's reach.
Absolutely.
But then when he passed away,
Yeah,
things got a little messy.
they did. A little messy is an understatement. Let's just say after Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's death, several of his disciples stepped forward,
Claiming to be.
his rightful heir, the one to lead the Gaudiya math.
Oh, wow. So it was more than just spiritual authority at stake here.
Oh, much more.
Huh.
There were temples, property, even manuscripts, all very valuable.
So not just spiritual leadership, real-world assets involved too.
Yes. And if we zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture, It reflects a tension that exists in so many religious traditions.
What do you mean?
Well, it's that challenge of balancing a founder's teachings
Yeah.
with the inevitable changes interpretations that come over time and with different leaders.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So in this case, that tension led to some serious legal battles. And there's one place in particular that became a focal point of the conflict. The Bag Bazaar math.
Right.
What was so special about that particular temple?
Well, it was strategically important for a few reasons. First, there was the symbolic value, its connection to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati.
Right.
But also, it had a lot of financial resources. Each faction really saw controlling it as key to their legitimacy.
It sounds like a total mess. And the Sons of the Sun highlights a couple of key players in all of this.
Yes.
Kunja Babu, who later became Bhakti Vilas Tirtha Maharaj and then Ananta Vasudeva.
Right.
And their stories really show just how deep these divisions ran within the Gaudiya math.
They do. And from this landscape emerges a new figure, Chris Butler, and his Science of Identity Foundation.
All right, now things are getting really interesting. To really get a handle on Butler's story, we've got some pretty fascinating sources. Science of Identity Foundation Wikipedia, about Butler FB SRC01 and DF Tulsi Gabbard.
And those offer a very multifaceted and often controversial view.
Multifaceted is putting it mildly. So tell me a bit more about his background. I mean, he doesn't sound like your typical spiritual leader.
You could say that Butler's background is definitely unconventional. He's the son of a communist involved in the 1960s counterculture. Even had an early interest in hallucinogenic drugs.
Wow. Okay, so not your typical guru origin story.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Then he joins the Hare Krishna movement, but eventually establishes his own path.
It's a pretty wild trajectory.
It is. And there's more. He initially directed his followers to be initiated by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami.
Oh, the founder of ISTK.
Exactly. So he clearly understood the importance of lineage in the Vaishnava tradition.
Okay, but then he later establishes himself as a guru.
He does. And that's where things get tricky.
How so?
Well, that's where the accusations of SIF being a cult start to surface.
And those accusations, they're pretty serious. Controlling behavior, isolation of members, financial irregularities, and then the rituals surrounding Butler.
Right. And those are something else. P.P. Tulsi Gabbard describes followers being forbidden from speaking publicly about SIF, eating spoonfuls of sand that he walked on, even claims that he ate his own nail clippings.
Okay. The image of people eating sand he walked on is something I won't soon forget. It makes you wonder, when does reverence become unhealthy?
A good question. That line might have been blurred for some of his followers.
It definitely raises some questions about the nature of guru-disciple relationships.
Absolutely. And the potential for exploitation.
And then there's SIF's past regarding homosexuality and Islam. Science of Identity Foundation's statement regarding past controversial lectures mentions that Butler stopped giving talks on those subjects. But that history, it's still a part of their story.
You're right. It's a reminder that when you look at a tradition's history, you have to confront the good and the bad.
Exactly. So we've gone from this charismatic movement in 16th century Bengal to a fractured institution in the 20th century, and now to this very controversial figure with his own organization. It's quite the journey.
It is, and it's about to get even more complex, because next we need to explore how SIF intersects with politics and finance.
And for that, P.P. Press, Tulsi Gabbard, and D.F. Tulsi Gabbard are going to be key.
Absolutely, because this is where Tulsi Gabbard enters the picture.
Right. A prominent U.S. politician and former presidential candidate.
And what's really important here is her family's deep involvement with SIF.
And those connections are everywhere. SIF members on her staff campaign financing family ties. Even her first husband's family is involved. It's quite the web.
It is.
Yeah.
And within that web, we start to see these allegations of financial impropriety.
Right. And the sources suggest this network of businesses connected to SIF, some with questionable practices, and then there's the wealth accumulated by some of the leaders.
One name that stands out is Joseph Bismark, a key figure in SIF who was involved with QN.
Right. A multi-level marketing company accused of being a pyramid scheme.
It's quite a contrast. On one hand, these lofty ideals of selflessness and devotion. On the other hand, these allegations of financial manipulation.
It's a lot to take in. So far, we've covered the philosophical foundations of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the fracturing of the Gaudiya math, and this controversial leader with connections to politics and finance. But we're not done yet. Now we need to look at the concept of Vaishnava aparadha.
Offenses against devotees.
And our main sources for this will be Correspondentio MDTO and offensive letters from Chaitanya Mission against our beloved Gurudev.
This is where we really see the fallout from those broken relationships we talked about earlier. And the story of Mahabhava Das, a prominent SIF disciple who left to join another Gaudiya Vaishnava group under Bhaktivedanta Narayana Maharaja. It perfectly illustrates this concept.
So leaving SIF wasn't just a personal choice, it was seen as a betrayal.
Exactly. SIF leaders saw it as an offense against his guru, Chris Butler, and against the organization itself.
And what does Vaishnava aparada actually mean?
It emphasizes how serious it is to commit offenses against devotees. It's seen as a huge obstacle on the path to spiritual progress.
So it's not just about disagreeing with someone, it's about actions that are seen as disrespectful or harmful to those on a spiritual path?
Exactly. And the reactions from SIF leaders when Maharaja Das left were intense. They claimed he was lured away.
That's really interesting because that highlights that sense of possessiveness and control that's often seen in groups accused of being cults.
Right. And the letters from Acharya Dasa's SIF leader to Narayana Maharaja are really telling.
In what way?
They're full of anger, betrayal, even threats.
Oh, wow. But we also have Maharaja Das's own explanation for why he left.
Found in list Krishna Karunya Dasa Dosida Swarupanandizir, MC Tani Forum, wismukhi.bhaktijoga.pl.
Right, and he emphasizes his need to be connected with realized souls to deepen his understanding. He's not rejecting the tradition itself, just saying he needs this connection to grow.
Exactly. He's focusing on that experiential side of bhakti, the idea that you don't just intellectually understand the philosophy, you have to feel it, live it through connection with those who embody it.
And for him, he found that in Bhaktivedanta and Narayana Maharaja. It's fascinating that he references a teaching from Srila Swarupa Damodara Goswami in the Chaitanya Charitamrita
A key text.
about how to truly understand the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Another important text.
He says you have to hear it from a realized Vaishnava to really grasp it.
It speaks to that power of direct transmission, the belief that knowledge isn't just in books, it's passed down through a living lineage.
Okay, but then how do we reconcile that with those accusations of offenses? If he truly felt he needed to seek out another guru to progress, was he really in the wrong?
Well, this is where things get complicated. This is about personal faith and the dynamics between guru and disciple. It's not our place to judge.
I see. But what we can do is look at the broader implications. Given how strongly people reacted to him leaving, what does that tell us about authority and control within SIF? Or even Gaudiya Vaishnavism in general?
That's a big question, and it raises some uncomfortable possibilities. If seeking different teachers is seen as such a serious offense, does it limit people's spiritual freedom?
It makes you think about how much weight we should give to these accusations of offenses, especially when we're trying to figure out if a teacher's teachings are legitimate or if a group is one we'd want to be part of.
It's a crucial consideration, and it becomes even more important when we factor in the allegations against Chris Butler and SIF. All those claims of controlling behavior, the financial issues, the unusual rituals, it makes you question the line between devotion and potential exploitation.
It's a far cry from that peaceful image of Gaudiya Vaishnavism that we might have started with.
But this isn't unusual. As traditions grow and evolve, new interpretations emerge, power dynamics shift, and conflicts are bound to arise.
Right, so we started with this beautiful philosophy, explored how things got more complicated as it grew and became more institutionalized. And now we're facing the reality that things aren't always what they seem.
It's a lot to process.
It is. There's this idea within Gaudiya Vaishnavism called Kali Yuga. It refers to the present age, this time of spiritual darkness and decline.
Right. And it suggests that even a tradition focused on love and devotion can be affected by the challenges of this time.
So even the most spiritual paths aren't immune to human nature and the influence of the world around us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have to be willing to grapple with that complexity.
That makes a lot of sense. So it seems like with every layer we peel back, there's even more complexity. But we have to keep exploring. We need to delve deeper into these accusations of offenses, Maharaja Das's motivations, and try to understand it all within this larger context of Gaudiya Vaishnavism and what it means to be a devotee today.
Yeah.
This is all really thought-provoking.
It is. It's about asking those tough questions and thinking critically. Let's see where this deep dive takes us next. You know, it's like this push and pull, this tension between the emphasis on lineage, on that guru-disciple relationship, and then this very human need to grow, to explore, maybe even to question things.
It's almost like you're caught between these two powerful forces. On one hand, you're told, surrender to your guru, that's the path.
Right.
But then you have people like Maharaja Das who feel drawn to seek out other teachers' different perspectives, to really deepen their understanding.
And if you look at the sources, those letters from Acharya Das, they frame this seeking as a major offense.
Right.
Their argument is that by leaving SIF, he's essentially rejecting his lineage, undermining his own progress.
So they're basically saying it's like a spiritual crime.
Pretty much. But if you look at Maharaja Das's own words, He's not rejecting the tradition itself.
Right. He's just saying he needs that direct connection.
Yes, he needs that connection with realized souls to really grasp the essence of the teachings.
He's really emphasizing the experiential side of bhakti.
Absolutely.
It's not just about reading the books.
No, it's about feeling it, living it.
And for him, he found that connection with Bhaktivedanta Narayana Maharaja. What's interesting is he brings up this teaching from Srila Swarupa Damodar Goswami in the Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Right, a key text.
And he's talking about how to really understand the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Which is another crucial text.
He says you can't really get it unless you hear it from someone who embodies it, a realized Vaishnava.
It all goes back to this idea of direct transmission. This belief that knowledge is passed down through a lineage.
Almost like a living energy.
Exactly. But then how do you reconcile that with all those accusations of offenses?
Right. If he truly felt he needed this other guru to move forward, was he really doing something wrong?
This is where it gets really tricky. We're talking about personal faith.
Yeah.
The intricacies of those guru-disciple relationships, it's not really for us to judge.
You're right. But I think what we can do is look at the bigger picture. The fact that people reacted so strongly to his leaving,
Right.
what does that tell us about authority and control within Seth? Or even Gaudiya Vaishnavism more broadly?
It's a good question. It raises some uncomfortable possibilities. Does this strict adherence to one lineage stifle individual exploration?
Right. Does it create this environment where people are afraid to think for themselves?
Exactly. It makes you think about how much weight we should really give to those accusations of offenses.
Especially when we're trying to decide if a teacher is authentic or if a group is a healthy environment.
It's a crucial factor.
Mm.
And it becomes even more relevant when we consider the allegations against Chris Butler and Sif.
Right. All those claims of controlling behavior, the financial stuff, those strange rituals. It makes you wonder where the line is between devotion and exploitation.
It does. It paints a very different picture than that peaceful image of Gaudiya Vaishnavism we might have started with.
But I guess this isn't unusual. As traditions grow, they change. New interpretations come up, power dynamics shift, and conflicts are bound to happen.
You're absolutely right. It's part of the process.
So we began with this beautiful philosophy, explored its evolution, and now we're confronting these more challenging aspects.
It's a lot to absorb.
It really is. There's this concept in Gaudiya Vaishnavism called Kali Yuga,
Right.
and it refers to the present age, this time of spiritual darkness and decline.
And it suggests that even a tradition rooted in love and devotion isn't immune to these challenges.
It's almost like saying even the most spiritual paths are affected by human nature and what's happening in the world.
Exactly. That's the reality we have to face.
It makes sense. So it seems like the deeper we go, the more complex it gets. But we have to keep digging. We need to understand those accusations against Mahavadasi, his reasons for leaving, and try to make sense of it all within this larger context of Gaudiya Vaishnavism and what it means to be a devotee today.
It's about critical thinking, asking the tough questions, and really engaging with the material. Let's see where we end up.
Yeah, it really is. It
Yeah.
makes you think about the challenges of staying true to those core values of any tradition, especially in a world that feels like it's kind of spinning out of control.
Absolutely. You know, we keep coming back to this idea of Kali Yuga.
Yeah, this age of spiritual darkness.
Right. And if it's truly as difficult a time as they say, maybe it shouldn't surprise us that even a tradition focused on love and devotion would have these conflicts and controversies.
Yeah, I can see that. So, okay, we've gone through all this. We've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. How do we make sense of it all?
Well, I think it's a powerful reminder that no spiritual path is perfect.
Right, because people aren't perfect.
Exactly. We have to be willing to hold both those truths. The potential for incredible transformation, but also the potential for things to go off the rails.
So what does all this mean for someone trying to understand Gaudiya Vaishnavism?
Or any tradition for that matter.
Yeah. What are the key takeaways here?
Engage with it all critically.
What do you mean?
Don't just accept what you hear, even if it's coming from someone you respect or what seems like a reliable source.
That's good advice in general.
It is ask questions.
Yeah.
Seek out different viewpoints and be aware that there might be biases, hidden agendas even.
Especially when you're dealing with accusations of harm.
Absolutely. Whether it's financial, emotional, psychological.
Right. And a lot of our sources, especially those accounts from former SEF members, they really show how dangerous blind faith can be.
It's about finding that middle ground, respecting tradition, but also using your own judgment.
Your own discernment.
Exactly. Real spiritual growth often means questioning what you think you know, challenging authority, figuring out what truly resonates with you.
So we've covered a lot in this deep dive.
We have the origins of this tradition, its evolution.
And some tough realities.
Yeah. When human ambition mixes with spiritual seeking, things can get messy.
They definitely can. But I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is just how important critical thinking is.
Absolutely. Staying informed and trusting your instincts.
If something feels wrong, don't ignore that feeling.
Never underestimate the power of questioning.
This has been such an eye-opening look into this world, and I think that's what these deep dives are all about.
Giving you the information you need to make your own decisions.
Exactly. Thanks again for walking us through all this.
It's been my pleasure.
To everyone listening, thanks for joining us. And remember, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep searching for what resonates with you.